Hello students and welcome. Today we're going to do a complete revision of your Class 9 chapter, What is Democracy? Why Democracy? We'll go through all the important concepts one by one so that you feel absolutely confident for your upcoming exams.
All right, so here's our revision plan. Think of it as our roadmap. We're going to start with the basics, look at the four core features, weigh the arguments for and against democracy, understand its broader meaning, and finally, I'll give you some solid exam tips to help you score well.
Okay, everyone, let's dive right in. We're going to begin with the most fundamental ideas. The absolute basics you need to understand this chapter.
Now, pay close attention here. These 4 points on your screen, well, they're the most important topics from this entire chapter. You really need to focus on them because questions will definitely come from these areas. This is your core exam focus.
Okay, so let's start with the simple definition. This is a great starting point for any answer you write. Democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. It's an idea that's often linked back to Abraham Lincoln's famous words, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
But, and this is a really important but, this simple definition just isn't enough. Why? Well, because many countries hold elections, they might look like democracies, but that one act alone doesn't make them truly democratic. We need to dig a little deeper to tell the real ones from the ones that are just pretending.
All right, now we're getting to the most crucial part of this chapter. These are the 4 core features of democracy. I want you to think of them like the 4 strong pillars that hold up any real, genuine democratic state.
So the first feature is this. Major decisions must be taken by leaders who are elected by the people. It's all about who has the final say. In a real democracy, that power, the ultimate decision-making power, has to be with the people we've chosen.
And a classic example to remember for this point is Pakistan under General Musharraf. See, elections did happen, but the final power wasn't with the elected representatives, it was with the military officers. So, was it a true democracy? No, because the people's chosen leaders weren't the ones making the big decisions.
Okay, on to our second feature. This one's about the elections themselves. It's not enough to just have an election. It must be a free and fair election. And what does that mean? It means there has to be a real choice for the voters, and, this is key, those currently in power must have a fair chance of losing.
Let's look at a couple of examples. In China, for instance, you can't just stand for election. The candidates have to be approved by the Communist Party. So is there a real choice for the people? Not really. Or think about Mexico, where for a long time, the PRI party used all sorts of dirty tricks to make sure they always won. These are perfect examples of elections that aren't free and fair.
Feature number 3 is all about a very fundamental idea, political equality. It's so simple but so powerful. In a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote, and each of those votes must have one value. One person, one vote, one value. Simple as that.
But sometimes this principle is violated. A clear example is Fiji. In their electoral system, the vote of an indigenous Fijian has more value than the vote of an Indian Fijian. That directly goes against the principle of one person, one vote, one value, making it undemocratic.
And that brings us to our fourth and final feature. Just because a government wins an election, it doesn't mean it can do whatever it wants. A democratic government has to rule within certain limits that are set by the Constitution and by the rights of the citizens.
A really powerful example here is Zimbabwe under President Mugabe. His government was popular and won elections, but then they started changing the Constitution to increase their own power. They suppressed opposition and ignored basic rights. This shows us that even a government that's elected can be undemocratic if it doesn't respect the rules and the rights of the people.
So, now that we have all 4 features, we can put them together to create the full, proper definition of democracy. This is what you should remember for your exams. It goes like this. Democracy is a form of government where rulers are elected by the people. These elected rulers take all the major decisions. The elections offer a real and fair choice to the people. This choice is available to everyone on an equal basis. And finally, the government that is formed is limited by the Constitution and citizens' rights. That's the complete picture. Okay, so we've defined democracy. But is it the perfect system? Of course not. So now, let's revise the arguments, the debate really, about democracy. We'll look at the arguments against it and the arguments for it. And this is a very, very common question in exams, so let's focus.
So, let's look at the debate. On the one hand, people argue against democracy.
They say it leads to instability because leaders keep changing, that it leads to delays because so many people have to be consulted, and that it can sometimes lead to corruption. But on the other hand, the arguments for democracy are very strong. It's a more accountable government. It usually improves the quality of decisions. It enhances the dignity of every citizen, and it gives us a way to deal with conflicts peacefully.
But perhaps the single biggest argument in favor of democracy is this: it allows us to correct our own mistakes. Think about it. Any government can make a bad decision. But in a dictatorship, there's not much you can do. In a democracy, there's room for public discussion. We can protest, we can debate, and in the next election, we can change the rulers. That's a huge advantage.
Okay, moving on to our next section. So far, we've talked about democracy as a form of government, but the idea of democracy is actually much bigger than that. It's a principle we can see and use in our everyday lives.
So that begs the question, right? Is democracy something that only applies to governments and voting? Or can we apply these same ideas, these principles, in other places too?
And the answer is a definite yes. Think about a democratic family, one where everyone's opinion is heard before a big decision is made. Or a democratic classroom, where students feel free to ask questions and discuss ideas. The basic principle is the same, taking decisions together with consultation and consent. It can apply to any group or organization.
All right, we have reached our final and very practical section. We've done the revision. Now let's talk about how to present your answers in a way that will get you the highest possible marks in your exam.
So here's a simple 4-step guide to writing the perfect answer. 1. Start with a clear definition. 2. Explain the concept with its key features. 3. And this is very important, use at least one relevant example, like the ones we discussed for Pakistan, China, or Zimbabwe, to support your points. And 4. Conclude your answer by summarizing the main idea. If you follow this structure, your answer will be logical, clear, and will definitely impress the examiner.
So you are prepared. Remember, just like the fate of a democracy depends on its citizens, your marks really depend on how well you use what you know. You've done the hard work of revision. Now, just link these concepts logically and write your answers with confidence. All the very best for your exams.